Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast that reboots your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. I'm your host, Brian Alexander, and this is Ranching Reboot, episode 150. Today, we're going to visit a diverse 11,000 acre regenerative grazing operation in southeast Montana. But first, the business. Ranching Reboot is sponsored by Land Trust. Land Trust is your first stop as a sportsman looking for a new place to play or hunt. And for all of us landowners, Land Trust is a great way to find those sportsmen and have some peace of mind while they're out hunting or playing. You know, when somebody knocks on my door or cold calls and wants to talk about hunting, that's really hard for me because I don't know the person on the other end of the phone and I don't know anything other than what's standing in front of me on the porch. Land Trust takes all that anxiety away by conducting background checks and verifying everyone's identity. When you partner with Land Trust, you don't give up anything. You don't give up any control. You have full control over all the booking. And if you get a bad feeling about somebody, you don't have to send them an offer. Listing your property on Land Trust costs you nothing. In fact, Land Trust will do most of the hard work for you. They'll even send a rep out to scout your place and work with you to tailor your offerings. Heck, they'll even write most of your listing and upload all the pictures. Land Trust is a great platform for both landowners and sportsmen to connect. Check it out today by going to the link in the show notes or by simply going to www.landtrust.com. Support for this episode is also provided by my amazing patrons on patreon.com/redhillsrancher. Patrons on Patreon and subscribers on Spotify get access to a podcast feed without all those annoying ads that everybody skips anyway. Tell you what, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to issue a challenge. It's a lot of work making 2 versions of the podcast and getting them all uploaded. So I want to make a deal. If just 20 of you sign up for a subscription or support the podcast on Patreon, I will turn off all of the embedded ads for everyone for the whole rest of the year. You heard that right. Just 20 of you sign up for the subscription on Spotify or support me on Patreon. I'll turn off the ads for everybody for the rest of the year. That's it. All right. My guest today is Meyer, a second-generation holistic manager, and we're going to talk about grazing, water infrastructure, cover cropping, and how they have recently pivoted their business to better serve their customers. Here we go. Meyer, good morning, sir. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh,
Having me on.
Hey, good to have you here. I'm cold. It's cold, but that's also January. You know, I probably shouldn't complain about how cold it is because you're in Montana and I'm in Kansas.
Yeah, it wasn't last week we had negative 64-degree wind chill.
We didn't quite get there. I think we were somewhere in the negative 20s, which is plenty
It's
bad.
still cold. It's probably almost colder. You guys probably have more humidity down there than we got.
Winters here are usually really, really dry.
Oh, okay.
We've had some humidity this year. We've had more precipitation this winter than we've had like the last 2. So it's hard to complain about the precipitation, but when it's we've only had just a couple hours of thaw in like the last week. So there's ice still sticking around from 10 days ago, that's not a normal thing here. Like if we have ice snow that sticks around for more than a week, that's kind of a noteworthy event.
Really? Yeah. Well, usually when we get snow, we keep it. We got snow in October, a foot of it. And that actually saved our bacon as far as the moisture went. And then we had a beautiful November and December. It was about the warmest on record that I can remember. We got a lot of fall projects done that we didn't get done in the fall. So,
were you guys dry up there for the growing season?
You know, we did pretty good. No, it was what I would consider what I would like to think is an average year. If we could have stayed away from the grasshoppers and the flies, then we would have had about your perfect average year, I guess. If you take that as you will.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about where are you guys at in Montana?
We're in the southeastern corner. We're 10 miles west of a little town called Ekalaka, Montana.
Okay.
My family has been ranching here since the early 1908 is when my grandma's family started ranching in this country, homesteaded. And my grandma married my grandpa, and they got a portion of the ranch in 1931, I believe. And my dad inherited it when my grandpa died. And 81, I believe. I might be wrong on that date. The date really isn't as important, but he took over and had to go through the whole high interest rate days of the 80s and try and keep it because we were in debt when he took it over. And then he's done very well for himself and actually doubled the size of it since then. So we've got about 11,000 acres out here.
Doubled the size of the ranch since the 80s. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I've talked to a few folks from Montana. Let's see. Of course, our friends Nick and Coulter over there in Bozeman.
Yep.
I think the last guest I interviewed was also right there around Bozeman. So that's Western Montana's mountains and cool stuff. What's Southeast Montana like?
We get, I guess if you could say we're close enough to North Dakota and that, the wind and weather patterns that they get, it's gets cold here and stays cold. I went to college in Billings and my brother and sisters went to college in Bozeman, and I'd say that Bozeman gets the weather and even Billings gets the weather, but they'll get warm snaps to kind of melt stuff off as far as in the valley and in the town, that is. And in Ekalaka, we don't really get that. We're always once we get it, we keep it kind of usually. And we get a lot of wind, really windy in our area.
I think
so. I'm not going to give you the doom and gloom and say, we're the coldest, worst place to live in America. If you can survive ranching here, you're really doing it, but it can be extreme.
Wind. I mean, Kansas is named for the Kansas tribe, people of the wind. And
yeah,
I know what wind is like.
Yeah.
And I've traveled up through South Dakota, North Dakota a little bit, and, kind of skip through a little bit of Wyoming. I've never actually been to Montana. I'm going to try to cross that off the old bucket list this year.
Yeah.
I think that people that live on the coasts don't understand what wind is. Like only us people that live here in the plains understand wind.
I think so. I've got, relatives, even in Montana, they come from Bozeman and Western Montana or places. And how could you stand to live? Does it ever stop blowing out here? I guess when you just get acclimated, I mean, I still do not like the wind, but I live in the wrong place, not like it. I get used to it more than I think I do. I realize
it just, a lot of times the wind will straight up blow me right back into the house at about 20 to 25 miles an hour.
Yeah. Well, why not?
When it's hard to stand up outside, you should probably not be there anymore and go in and
get
cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long have you been there? How long have you been ranching?
Well, I've been here full-time ranching since I graduated college in 2011, and been helping Dad I guess I would say I really stepped into a role. My brother left and went into the Navy in 2003 or 4.
Raw? I was Navy.
And he was in for 8 years. But when he left, I kind of was the next oldest boy, and I had to step up into that position. So I guess ever since then, I've been, for lack of a better term, maybe the right-hand man or pretty involved, very involved, But full-time since I got out of college in 2000.
What'd you go to college for?
Construction, actually. Carpentry. I just went to a tech. I was too poor to go to a 4-year school, so I just figured I'd go get a trade.
Okay. Kind of trying to think about that, and what did you find there in carpenter school to apply to ranching?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've always been I always like to build stuff, and so as far as, just doing some carpentry around the ranch itself there, I took some wiring classes. I have used that. So maybe not in a business sense, I've used it, but in a working sense of applying the trades I learned there, I've actually used it.
Okay. Always interesting to hear what people's education experience is like, and if they got kicked off the ranch for a little while and had to go work for somebody else before they were allowed to come back. And I think that's one of the things that helped me is, so like I mentioned, I joined the Navy. I was in from 1997 to 2006, so just over 8 years. Um, got out, came back to the ranch, which I'm sure is a story that it gets repeated a lot. Um,
Yeah.
but
it's good. Good. I should have probably went longer.
Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is I think it was a really good experience, you know, even though there was a business that I could come back to. It was a good experience to have to go work for somebody else and have to work for a non-family member in an actual business setting. And okay, not like the Navy's really, big business or anything, but you're working for other people that have other goals and you don't know them like you know your parents that you grew up with. So it's a different environment and there's benefits, I suppose.
Oh yeah. I think there's huge benefits. It just even on a management aspect of picking up, I did work for some ranches when I was going to college part-time. And I picked up some philosophies and stuff from one particular ranch that I worked for that a lot of them were aligned, but they lived in Billings and could trade and sell a little more often. So I got to kind of deal with that. They also ran sheep. Got to learn a little bit about sheep. We never ran sheep. My dad used to when he was young, but I've never ran sheep in my lifetime on this ranch. So kind of get to pick up a little bit of a variety of something you wouldn't see if you don't leave. So
Yeah. And that's just getting out and exploring some other options. And, sounds like you did that while you were in college. And I think that's great. So I'm interested to learn some more about your history because when we were texting and emailing back and forth, you said that your dad's been doing regenerative stuff for 40 years. Tell me about that.
well, he's been building electric fence since the 80s, and he put in. There was a NRCS guy that was a savory, uh, you know,
Acolyte, disciple.
done this, yeah, one of his disciples or whatever, and kind of got dad started on building more cross fences and on a large scale, or I shouldn't say large scale, but a not a very intensified pie, graze around the water tank, add some more um, fences and try to improve the pastures that way and stuff. So
the wagon wheel or the pie around a water trap, that was the thing in the 80s. Like,
yeah, it was. It's huge. Yep. That was everybody. And it's still pretty big now. I think people are moving away from it a little more now, but
I think we've just had to do the wagon wheel for enough years to kind of see some of the issues with it. And
yeah,
I think there's also something to be said about technology needed to catch up a little bit. And so I've got a bunch of those legacy wagon wheels and I kind of still build them because I can't figure out a better way. And you mentioned like NRCS. So there's a couple different ways to skin the cat with water these days. If you've got a blank slate and you don't own the land, it doesn't make sense to go in and trench in pipelines and put in permanent tanks, which, not saying anything bad about NRCS or any of those other programs, but if you can't get your landowner on board, you can't get that stuff done through NRCS and you're running lines above ground with temporary infrastructure. And I think, we're both owner operators. So, and let's face it, we're kind of a dying breed. There's very few of us left and there's less every day. And we're moving more towards a model where there's, corporate or absentee ownership and the ranchers just leasing the land. So I guess what I'm saying is I think a lot of the ranches that have the ability to already do these developments using NRCS money, I think we've already done it. I think most of us have already done it. And the people that aren't doing it is because they don't qualify. They can't get ownership to agree to put in the piece. So wagon wheels are great. And that's just what they make you build.
Yeah. To hit on that just a touch, we have done a lot of it, and I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with it. And there's a lot of good things that come from it. And I will say though, that especially in the early 2000s, when we were really ramping up and designing and building our strip grazing system and adding a lot more tanks, we were putting in a tank in every half mile and building a lot of 2-wire crossmen. Their specs weren't up to par or were over par. They were trying to make us do some things that I didn't think that we needed to do. And it was going to, we had to come to a decision. Well, are we going to jump through their hoops, or are we going to build it the way we know it will work? Because we knew more about electric fence and probably still do than the government does right now. I'm just going to flat out say it. I don't mean to be that arrogant about it, but they're not that. I mean, there's a difference between being in the office trying to design it or going out there and practicing and knowing what works, and one thing I will say about electric fence too is on to kind of side with the government a little bit is, when you go to wire your house, there's codes and everything else you've got to stand by. And everybody that I run into, because I sell electric fences, says that they hate electric fence. They say why they hate it, and you realize that, well, they used a really bad charger, or they used really bad posts, or bad indicators. They didn't, they just didn't do it.
Or they tried to ground it to the barbed wire fence.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. You hear all this different stuff. Well, that's why you didn't. You had a bad experience. And so I understand where the NRCS has their, or, the government programs have their stipulations on why they want to do it. But in our particular case, we needed to kind of get away from them a little bit. And they've caught up. In a lot of ways, they've caught up now. It just took this long to get to that.
Yeah.
But going to your lease part too, we actually did put in a bunch of pipeline and fence, but we did have a landowner on board, but we actually did it our own dime. And we had a lot of people kind of looking at us with the side eye wondering, how does that work? And Dad said, well, and at that time in that economy, when we were putting it in, has been the mid 2000s, we were putting it in for $50 an acre, fence and pipeline. And Dad said, one of them was a farmer, and he said, well, how much do you have into your wheat crop this year? And this is a lifetime investment, especially if it's on my own place. But he said, even if I get 10 years, we had a real good relationship with our landlord too. So that's a little bit different story. But
well, I know a lot of the reason why the government NRCS is really hesitant to fund anything that can be seen as temporary, like any kind of temporary electric fence or polywire, above ground poly lines or portable tanks, because they don't want you to be able to pick it up and go sell it 6 months after they paid for 75% of it and you pocket the money. Okay, I get that. And that kind of behavior wouldn't be right anyway. But I can also definitely see where people would take advantage of it. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
So, like everything else, it seems like a pretty simple solution on low level. But when you kind of zoom out to 30,000 foot and look at some of the bigger problems, it's like, oh, well, that's why they don't do this, because probably 50% of the people would just take that crap and sell it the next year and pocket the money and laugh at the government. And I hate paying taxes more than anybody else.
And then cuts them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hate paying taxes, and I like to get as much of that back as possible. But, there's also the point that, if it's buried in the ground, I can't just pick it up and sell it, which, and you have to respect that point, because it's everybody's money. It's not just a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. They got an investment.
But then, I think about, this trend that we're on of going to absentee and corporate land ownership for all of our ranches and, big tracts of land in the West. And I wonder, okay, who's this benefiting? It's where's it all going? Every year they say, well, we've got so much money left in these programs that we didn't fund. Why aren't people coming in? well, people aren't coming in because there aren't any of us
don't work anymore.
Yeah, we're not there. I mean, there's nobody left anymore that qualifies for all this stuff.
Yeah.
So let's see. You mentioned your dad got connected with somebody in the 80s. Sounds like that was an early disciple of Savory, and I think there was a lot of those going around, or not a lot. There were a few of those going around. From what I remember of the story, it was around like 80, 81, 82 when Alan Savory and Stan Parsons had to leave Zimbabwe. And now those guys both come from the same part of the world with a lot of the same ideas. And by all accounts, they're not really, buddies.
Yeah.
I think that they spent a lot of time together in the early 80s talking and co-developing concepts. And my understanding of it is that Stan Parsons, who went off to do ranching for profit, he wanted to focus on the business and the financial side because he said, we got to save one ranch. And if we can save them through the economics, that's how we're going to save the rest. And Alan Savory was like, I'm not going to waste my time trying to change one ranch at a time. Everybody needs to do this right now. And my dad obviously got infected with some of that too, because it was probably later 80s. He started to take advantage of some of those. I think it was Great Plains program through NRCS. It was Soil Conservation Service at the time, to start doing cross fencing. And to kind of call back to our temporary infrastructure conversation. So he was one of the first in the state to get funded to put in electric cross fencing. Okay.
Sure.
Well, I mean, now I probably wouldn't even go to the NRCS office to get funding to do that because I can do it for like 14 cents a foot. Okay. I mean, I could get it pretty cheap now. But back then, they're like, okay, we'll give you money for that, but it's got to be a 3-wire with 2 hots and a neutral ground hung on steel T-fence posts with plastic insulators.
Yeah.
I mean, you might as well build a barbed wire fence if you're going to do all that.
Yeah.
So he built a bunch of that. And, over the years, between when he built it in 2006, a lot of it came out, but I still had some of it that I ended up tearing out after the wildfire in 2016, because it was just wire needed to come out. And I was looking at how the paddocks in that pasture were configured. I'm like, I don't like this at all. We're just going to, the wires got to come out. We're going to pull all the posts. We're going to put them in a pile, and I'm going to do something different over here. So that's what I did. But yeah, there's still some of that going around, and I'm not even sure what they're allowing people to do now for electric fence, because at 14 cents a foot, it's just cheaper for me to buy the crap and go do it than to waste any time driving to the office and doing paperwork. That's how I feel anyway.
Yeah, you got to jump through the hoops and check their boxes, and sometimes it's beneficial to do that, and sometimes you got to step back, and say, maybe I should just.
Yeah, and there's some really good programs right now to help drill wells and put in water lines that I'm going to be trying to take advantage of in the next year. But I'm not going to put in any tanks. I'm just going to put quick connect risers everywhere, and then have a couple hundred feet of above ground line that I can hook onto that riser and run 500 feet over and set one of those big tanks that like Shane Barber down in South Dakota makes. Are you familiar with those?
I'm not, but there's a guy here that I'm friends with that lives close nearby. They're within 40 miles. That is, he has his own design, and that's what he does: risers and quick connects. Our deal is once we got the pipeline in the ground, we figured it wasn't too much more to just go ahead and put the tank. And plus, every tank we have can be used as a winter tank, just with our squirter system and our overflows and stuff that we have in them. And we're really blessed also too to be in pretty sandy ground. Maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's a curse. But we can do like a French drain tile right into that sand, and so the overflow never frees up or anything like that. Works pretty slick, our system. But I can also see we did start with we were going to do a bunch of banjo fittings and risers in the temporary tank. We built our own temporary tank, and we're moving it around and pulling some poly pipe over the ground, from each riser. But we wanted to kind of make this a very low labor and low maintenance system where if I get an intern or I get, my wife, or, not that my wife isn't very capable because she is, anybody that is new, I can take them out and in a couple of days, get them trained to go move my cows and, run the poly wire. My strips are 880 feet apart or a sixth of a mile. And then it's just really quick, about 11 temporary posts, and you're done rolling up your poly wire and you can leapfrog it. We just leapfrog down the strip. But so that's kind of why we decided to do what we were doing with our tanks and stuff, as opposed to doing risers and temporary tanks. I guess, but I'm not opposed. There's always something that fits somebody's ranch better than somebody else's. So I'm not opposed to any of the ideas that any other people are doing.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about how you freeze proof your water systems and freeze proof your water tanks, your valves, and keep open water for cattle. Because look, let's face it, it's January. It's freaking cold.
Yeah,
we've all been out having to break ice and chop ice. How do you minimize that?
So every one of our tire tanks has they're poured with concrete in the middle, filled with sand because we have it for about 2/3 of the middle, and then we just take and buy Quickcrete, dump it in dry, and tamp it down and get it compacted pretty good, and then we'll put a 4-foot manhole ring in on top of that dry concrete, and I'll chop a hole, 2 inches by 4 inches or whatever in the bottom of that manhole ring, and we'll just turn the water on, and that, as we all know from science class in high school, concrete will set up underwater. That is a quick, easy way that we can do our tire tank. And then I'll take a Watson valve. Are you familiar?
Yep, I use lots of those.
And I'll take and run out the bottom of I weld it to a railroad plate. I guess I forgot to say, we come up through the middle of the tank with, I guess it's 2-inch PVC that goes into drain tile and goes into that sand.
So you've got a 2-inch come up. You've got a built-in 2-inch overflow in the center of the tank that goes to
in the center of the tank. Yep. And then we also have 1.25-inch riser poly that comes up right from a curb stop from our water line, and it comes up through the middle of the tank. And on the top of that poly, we have a 90-degree barb fitting that it goes down to 1-inch heater hose. We tie into a 1-inch heater hose off that barb fitting, and we call it our whip hose. Now, most people will just melt the flow permanent in the tank. Well, we have hundreds of tanks on this outfit now over the years, and so instead of having that many pretty pricey Watson floats, or valves, we just have all these 6-foot heater hoses tied into this barb fitting, and we have a banjo fitting on the end. And then we'll take and weld these Watson valves to a railroad plate. You ever see them railroad plates go off railroad ties?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Big, heavy chunk of flat iron, in other words, about 6 inches by a foot, and they're about a 1/2-inch thick flat iron, with the railroad spike holes and the ridges and stuff in them. We just used them because we had some on hand. It was kind of an accident that we come up with this patent. But we'll weld Watson valves to that and put a banjo fitting on it. That the female banjo fittings go on the Watson valve, or on the railroad plate in the valve, and then the male banjo end goes into the heater hose. And then that's how we'll move our floats from tank to tank in the summertime. And then in the wintertime, in addition on the Watson valve, we have a T that we come out with, and one of them ferrule copper, you can get them ferrules or whatever, and it goes to a 1/4-inch copper tubing.
Okay.
And we'll pinch the end shut a little bit to get a little velocity. Most people call it a gallon a minute restrictor or whatever. We'll just pinch the end of that copper tubing. It's about 6 inches long. Comes up out of this T that's right in front of the Watson valve, and pinch the end of it shut. We're not shut, but kind of halfway. And all that does is we've got really good pressure and we got a lot of wells in this place. So if you got to pinch that shut, it just increases the velocity and also uses a little less water. And that bubbles up on the float in that manhole, that ring.
Right.
And then I take a piece of 1/4 inch like fuel line rubber hose, and I tie that into another piece of copper tubing that goes out underneath the tank hole, out to the outside ring of the tank, outside the manhole, through that hole I told you that I chopped.
Yeah.
And same deal, pinch that shut a little bit so it increases velocity. And even during that 64-degree wind chill, we can chop a little bit of water depending on how open we have that tubing. I tell you, sometimes we pinch a little too much and then you got to cut and restart. It was, usually when it's really dog cold out, you'll have at the very least, if you have it set right, you'll have a 2-foot, water hole for your cows to water out of. And as we know, when it's that cold, they're not drinking a ton of water, but when you're feeding them hay, they'll go take their turn off.
Yeah.
And then we have a reducer lid on that 4-foot ring that we can, it goes down to like a 2-foot hole. And then we have these 2-foot lids that were insulated. It's all covered up. So it really protects the float and the valve. And if you have to chop a little bit of ice on the outside, you can. Or, if that all makes sense, I should have a picture for you. I'm not techie enough to run this over Zoom for you, but.
No, that's okay. I think I've got a pretty good picture. So, I mean, just the basics of it is you move the float valve and float assembly from tank to tank to save cost. Cause I mean, those Watson valves are great. Those Watson floats are great. They're not cheap.
They're not cheap and they're good. Like anything that's built well isn't usually cheap.
I mean, I've got, I think 29 tanks.
Yeah.
And I think I only have maybe 3 of them that don't have a Watson float valve in them right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You own more float valves than we do.
But Dad, I mean, I totally get the point of, of having these and just moving moving the expensive thing around. I get that. That's just not how our systems are designed and in the way they were put in. So it sounds like you have like some grid tied wells, water wells.
Yeah, we have 4 wells that all work together. They're all tied in together.
And that's where I'm kind of a little bit, kind of where I struggle is on part of the ranch, I've got good grid connected power and I've got good wells. On a lot of the rest of the ranch, I don't have access to electricity. So I have to make my
got solar.
Yeah. And the thing, like, when you're talking about how you set up your freeze proofing, with the small diameter line that was neck down to, generate pressure and make a spray. I don't have enough pressure or flow or volume to do that overnight. Like I just can't pump enough water during the 4 hours I get of sunlight a day in the wintertime to make up for that other, 18 hours that I'm trying to, trickle water to keep it from freezing. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge that I deal with when it gets super cold is I've either got to put the cows where they're going to have some free water, where the creek or pond or whatever, or I'm out 2-3 times a day breaking the ice. And I just haven't figured out a way around that with my lower pressure water systems. Maybe someday I will, maybe I won't, but maybe
one of my dad's famous sayings is every ranch has an unfair advantage. And I think actually somebody maybe, I don't know what, maybe it was one of them big namers said that, but we stole it. It stuck with us, in other words. We've probably got a few that I can name, but one of ours has been, we have a really close relationship with our well or our pipeline man. And him and my dad, it kind of, I hate to use the word invented, but designed and came up with a lot of this stuff, just them two knocking ideas together, you know what I mean? And in turn, when you get two guys, when you're on the same page as your waterworks guy or your pipeliner, um, good things can happen, you know what I mean? Especially when he's willing to come up with new ideas with you, what's going to work for you. And I know a lot of guys that when they hire a pipeline man to come in, it's his way or the highway. It don't matter how they wanted to put it in. It's just, well, this is what it's going to be.
We've got a really, I don't know how to say it. We got a really good water well crew, water well and pipeline crew in this area down here. Guy's been doing it for probably 40 years. Okay. So if you call him and be like, hey, Jess, I got a leak. Then I'll get a pasture map and I'll, kind of zoom in on it. I'll make a circle. Then I'll, draw a road out and I'll just text it to him. Yeah. And he'll show up and he'll fix it. And then he'll call me and be like, yeah, we got it fixed. We're on our way out. I'm like, oh, what was it? He's, oh, those glue joints I did 40 years ago finally failed. Pipeline. You're like, oh, well, at least you know who did it. Yeah. So I had that happen on some 2-inch PVC, like just 35, 40-year-old glue joints.
And you didn't have that happen, then you're lying to yourself, because the distance is going to happen at least every once in a while.
Yeah. And, it's to the point where it's not to the point, but I can maybe see a point in the future where I might just have to buy my own trencher and learn how to dig up water lines, because I have to dig up so much of that 30, 40, 50-year-old water line for the joints that are just eventually going to fail. Like that's something I really started to think about a lot in the last 10 years is, we design systems to last 20 years.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm still going to be here. Like, I'm going to have to rebuild that in 20 years. Holy crap.
Yeah.
And some of that I'm getting close to, because I've been here, I've been here since 2006, been running my business since 2008. Like, there's tanks that I put in brand new that I'm looking at going like, man, that thing's older than shit.
Just for a kind of comparison, there's fences on this place that, in the process of our evolution of learning how to build what we call correct, or do an electric fence right, since we started in the 80s. There's fences in this place that I've rebuilt myself in my lifetime, not just rebuilt myself, but in my lifetime, that we have built and rebuilt 3 times. Just trying to, as things evolved and changed, and we did that wrong. And, we tried the steel post route. We tried the, the After Pro posts, the flexible ones.
Oh yeah. Yep. Been there, done that.
We tried those, and all those, yanked all those out, had to redo all those. We're not unwilling to try something new around here, but it's a lot of times it does bite us in the butt. But what's that Edison quote? The national treasure made famous. I learned how to do it, build a light bulb, whatever it was, however many times the wrong way.
Right. Yeah. He didn't fail to make a light bulb 1,000 times. He learned 1,000 wrong ways to make a light bulb.
Yes.
Yep. Well, I like to say, you didn't fail. You learned something. FAIL stands for first attempt in learning.
Yep.
So, treat everything like a learning experience. All right. Tell me about I keep tripping over myself and not knowing where I'm going to go. Tell me about the cow hanging on the wall behind you.
Oh, well, actually, that spearhead back there, that is the Montana Centennial Cattle Drive that happened in '89, I think it was. It ran from Roundup to Billing, and they had it was a big to do. They started in Roundup, which is 45 miles north of Billings, and they had the wagons and the old truck wagons and the cow herd and cowboys and outriders and anybody that sounded to me like, I wasn't alive for it, but anybody that wanted to get on it could. And my dad did, and he bought this as a live, yearling steer or whatever it was at the time of the cattle drive. It was on the cattle drive. He bought it, and then as it grew up, it got transferred to the wall.
Let's say he looks like
got a little history, kind of a neat story.
Probably looks like he was maybe around 3 when he went to freezer camp.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So what kind of cattle do you guys run now?
Black Angus. Black Angus, or I should just say Angus. I'm not, I'm kind of colorblind. I don't care if they're red or black. What I would say 90% of our herd is Black Angus. We have some red influence just from a little bit of this and that here or there.
Okay. So we were talking before I mashed record button for just a couple minutes, and you said something about matching cattle to fit the environment. So how have you done that with your Angus? How have you guys done that on the Meyer Ranch with Angus cattle?
Well, to go back in history, like I say, I'm drawing on a lot of just sitting around listening to my old man. But in the 88, they dropped out. Dad said they dropped out so bad that the weeds didn't even green it up around the corral. And so they had to sell all of their cows. And in turn, when he went to rebuild in 90, 89, 90, 91, he was going all over the state and looking at cattle, and he was going to rebuild the Sunbuck right, and he went and talked to when they call it the Montana Mafia now, and back then even maybe they called it that. It was like Sixes and Stevenson's, the Envar and all of them. And he went and talked to a lot of them and just kind of toured the state looking at cattle. And he got hooked up with, I don't know where he bought the cows from, but bought some cows, and he got hooked up using EXT way back in the day, AI.
Okay.
And so we used him, and he's always just, and which is kind of a testament to my dad back then, because back then, if you look back in history of the cows, back then, you had Leachman and all these guys, and everything was bigger. I mean, you couldn't put enough height and leg underneath these cattle. And he always just hated those cows, and they didn't. Maybe he says that he doesn't know what he's doing, but he must have known what he's doing because, or why he liked the smaller, moderate cows. And I guess obviously he knew they were going to perform better in our area, but just always concentrated on using those. So in turn, we used some EXT and kind of some odds and ends bloodlines through those years, and then got on. We used a little bit of Pharaoh. Dad knew Kid a little bit, and then we really worked good for us as well after doing all of what we'd done previous years was using Tim Aldi and his stuff. And then we got hooked up with a guy by the name of Gerald Fry, and he was kind of preaching some his philosophies to us, and came and evaluated our cow herd, and this would have been in the early 2000s, the first time he came, like 2003, 4-ish. And he kind of encouraged my dad to maybe start keeping some of his own bulls and using our own sons and breeding back to our own herd, and then in turn, I think it was maybe 2007 or 8-ish, my dad ran into a guy by the name of Ian Mitchell out of South Africa at grass-fed exchange in Aberdeen, South Dakota, I think it was. And Ian Mitchell was breeding all of his cows, or keeping all of his bull calves and selecting the top 10%, who knows what. I wasn't there. I didn't hear a spiel, but they keep, taking the top percentage and using those yearling bulls on his own herd, and then turning around and selling them as 2-year-olds to all of his neighbors. My dad said, well, that's a money making. I'll do that. And in turn, if your genetics are there and what you're doing, stand out. If you're only taking the top 5%, are obviously the ones that are working in your environment. And so that's what we started doing. We started keeping our own bulls and using them as yearlings, and then we would get them in and we'd rough them through the winter. We'd rough them the whole time, actually. My dad's, another thing my dad always said, and I believe, and a lot of people I talk to believe in now, is, bulls only got to work a month and a half, 2 months out of the year. So when I feed them to the other, he'd better figure out he can eat tree bark. all you've got to do is get through the winter. And so we were roughing them and then selling what I like to call cowboy bulls now, or ranch bulls, as 2-year-old. And man, they would hit that green grass in May and just explode anyway. And they didn't have wrecked feet from feedlot issues. They didn't have fertility issues from the feedlot. I think in all the years that we were doing it and have been doing it, I've only tested 3 bulls badly that we raised. And a couple of those, she said that, I shouldn't say this, maybe it was 5 bulls, something like that, not over 5, but a couple of those, there's always well, you can come back in and retest it. There's a little blood in the semen. We can give them a shot, come back in and retest it. Well, kind of a once fail, every time fail on this outfit. So we said, no, we don't need to sell a bull bad enough to do that. So he just went down the road. I guess he didn't get to be a bull. That's how we maintained our quality. And then also we were able to sell them very reasonable to, like I said, they were cowboy bulls or rancher bulls, because I think they made money for our customers, because we were selling a very good product, I think. And we didn't have any money in them. Yep. Essentially just grass. And so we were able to sell them bulls for $2,500 a piece, or $3,000 a piece, a lot of years. And everybody always asks us, well, a lot of guys are buying heifers. We always guaranteed it. We wouldn't guarantee them as heifer bulls per se, because it's hard to always say that, oh, this one's going to work, because you always have that one black sheep that seems to sneak through somewhere and whatnot. But I guess that happens with every bull program. But one thing we'd always say is, well, the way we calve our cows is April, May, and they get kicked out into what I call the back 40, or, out there. And my dad was kind of and keep on saying my dad, but us as a collective family now, we just have the philosophy that when we go out there, if the weather's right, when we go out there and we're dinking with them, we're probably causing more wrecks than we're helping in a lot of cases, if you have the right kind of cows, and especially since we've been doing it for as long as we have. And so I always tell people, well, one way I kept my birth weights low is if it was a heavy birth weight, then it didn't live, probably, or, that's just how the cow died. Maybe the cow died, maybe the calf died. Obviously if we go out there and we see a problem, because we do go ride through them once a week or so, or try to go check them. But if we can save something, we do. I'm not going to try and say that we're just out there and I'm not trying to be bad caretaker, but
anything that doesn't, anything that gets check bred and is confirmed bred that doesn't bring one in at branding time, doesn't matter the reason. Get on the bus. Yeah. You're gone.
I had one time, I was talking to a guy, one rancher friend of mine, and I said, we were having that discussion. I said, well, what if, because we get them in the spring and we sort off all these dries, right? And they all go. Well, then you still have the fall dries, or what we call summer dries in fall, after you get through the summer, and obviously those need to go too, right? And we was talking and kind of having a rancher discussion with 2 or 3 guys, and somebody said, well, what if that cow's calf got struck by lightning? And he said, well, I don't care. She shouldn't have had him standing in that corner.
Exactly. But I need to take a quick break. I got to go recycle some coffee. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Just before that little break, we were talking about we're talking about your bulls and your cows and pushing them. And I listened to you talk about how you treat your bulls. Like, dude, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense to me to buy a bull for your operation that comes from something completely different. And by that, I'm saying, if you're a pasture-based operator that's doing strip grazing on native grass or on planted foragers or whatever, get your bulls from a program that looks like yours.
Yes. Yep.
Don't go buy your bulls from whoever Facebook says is the best place to buy an Angus bull, or whatever the flavor of the month is you're looking for.
Yep.
Go visit that ranch you're going to buy the bulls from and see how they develop the bulls. If they've got them all in a pen and every pen has a feed bunk, and they've got a bunch of feed bins and mixer trucks. Don't buy a bull from there unless your operation at home looks like that, because those bulls will not make good calves for you to eventually make good functional cows. Which, there's the cowman side of the game, and then there's the production side of the game, and we're have to be linked. But what's good for the cattleman is not always good for the feedlot, which is not always good for the packer. And getting everything squared is kind of a challenge. And I think that when we really challenge our cattle, our bulls, and our production cows in an environment, the more those crutches we kick out from under. Yeah, there's going to be pain. There's going to be, low conception rates. There's going to be fallout.
Oh man, I've seen that. I've got the stories. I mean, well, I'm not going to say that it's all been sunshine and rainbows.
Well, and that's what I think a lot of people have to get past is they want to win every year. I don't need to win every year. Just give me a good base hit. I mean, hell, sometimes tie, and I'll take a loss every once in a while because that's the name of the game. And, the grass isn't always consistent. The rain's not always consistent. The temperature's not always consistent. And it makes things, it makes it challenging to have consistency in production. One of my biggest challenges is feeding through the winter. And, I'm a lot farther south than you are. So when it does warm up, if I've got moisture, I'll get some cool season grass growth, which is going to be good for gains, going to have a lot of protein, great for the cows. There's some winters where you don't need to supplement a whole lot. And then there's winters like the ones we're having where, there's a lot of cake and there's a lot of hay getting hauled because it's been a little abnormally cold and we've had plenty of ground cover. So how do you guys feed through the winter?
Well, we were being in what we, this story and this journey that I told you for as long as we have, we were purists for a long time. It seemed like everybody was. But when they buy into this system, I'm going to, especially if you're hardcore, I'm not going to feed anything but hay, grass and hay. And if my cows can't survive on that, then they don't obviously belong to be here. Now, I will say that is still a good way to go. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But about 4 years ago, 2020, since 2020, we've had some, and even 16 and 17 before that were really tough. We ran into some years, man, we've had some drought and kind of some hard years. And on top of that, we've had some grasshoppers. And last year we had the grasshoppers and the flies. So we had the rainfall, but then we had the grasshoppers and the flies. And when they just throw wrinkles in the stuff, right? We used to do a lot of flash grazing and with our yearlings in the spring and go and nip. I call it flash grazing. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the practice, maybe not the term, but go and
can you break that down for me?
Order the plant and move the yearlings really fast and set these, because I graze a lot of tame pastures. My place is split half and half between tame and native. And them tame pastures are always ready all at the same time. You know what I mean? And so if I could go nip the top quarter of that plant, then I can come back in with them yearlings. Then I was getting really good gains with my yearlings because all the best part of the goodie in that plant is on the top of it, in that time of year. And then I'm coming right back with my cows and calves and going to regraze that stuff. And it set it back and made it stay greener longer, in the end of July and maybe even August, depending on the year. And those are the dog days in our country, and probably in a lot of people's country when things get really tough. And so when you have your average years without grasshoppers, that really works. And then you throw some drought and you throw some grasshoppers in there, things get a little more challenging. And then this year we had grasshoppers and flies, but we had the rainfall. So trying to figure out how to manage around that has been tough. But to go back to your original point, we decided, man, we're going to have to start supplementing a little bit because we're just, for one instance, the grasshoppers, anything we flash graze, the grasshoppers were just coming back through and just mowing over you. in any of that green stuff. And so when we're trying to breed in August, there, and if we're out on that native or that tame pasture and you're trying to breed and you got all these stems out there, we decided, well, maybe we should go out there and feed a protein source to help them digest that old stemmy grass. And so we've done a little bit of that. I tried to I'm feeding, I guess it's a plug for my feed guy, but right now I'm feeding a high protein cake out of Mile City. It's Mugley Feeds out of Mile City, Mugley Brothers Feed. And they have this pellet that I'm feeding. It's a cake, I guess. I'm feeding 3/4 inch pellet. It is alfalfa and sunflower and peas. And I told him, the only reason I came up with this is I told him I wanted it as high a protein as I could get without deep.
Okay.
And so I'll feed some of that, and I'm kind of liking that pretty good. And
what's the fat content in that cake?
I actually haven't yet. I just told Dad it's kind of been a crazy fall for us. But I've been telling him, we need to get that sent in and get I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a lot. It's with what is in it. It's all more about protein and using that protein to help break down that old grass that we've got, whether it be native or whatever. So.
Just anecdotally, I think if a guy can get cake that is higher in fat, like 8-10% fat and around 20% protein, I think that'd be a good deal. And I might even be afraid to look at, or not, I might even look at like something that was a little more like 12 or 14% if that fat was up around 8 to 10. And I don't really know why I'm saying that. I just the last several winters of looking at cows and, supplementing different cow herds on the ranch differently. I think having that extra fat in the winter supplement really makes a difference. And I don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's tough for the whole cake deal is really tough because you're looking at a lot of DDTs, a lot of crap, and a lot of these mixtures that you don't want. And so I kind of just went bare bones and told him, that's why I told him, I want this without DDGs. I don't like DDGs, and I don't think they're good for cattle, especially in my production cycle, being a producer, cow-calf producer, primarily. I raise my own yearlings and I take in some yearlings, but for me to keep my female and my bulls, the quality of those up, I need to keep an eye on what I'm feeding them for reasons we've already talked about, I think, or at least touched on a little bit. And so that's why I've got what I got. And I do know that those cows of ours, with how we've developed them over the years, thrive on dried out, mature, decadent, morbid, I guess, grass, and that cake, and stockpiled grass, whatever you want to call it. We can stockpile some winter forage and cake them. And, if I can consistently get some second cut hay in, I would be a lot more tempted to feed a lot more of that as a supplement throughout the winter. Unroll on a bale of that every once in a while for them. The problem with me is in Eaglock, it's 2 hours away from the nearest Walmart, and coincidentally 2 hours nearest irrigation as well.
Okay.
So it's tough to get a consistent second cutting product in here. And so the cake is something we can always get. And so that's probably why we're using it. I did buy a couple loads of second cutting alfalfa this year, but just something we got to keep our nose to the grindstone and keep figuring out what we can get, what we can use. And I'm not afraid to try the different feed options. I just always got to try and figure out what's something that maybe is the right price and going to work.
And that's the trick, is the right price is more anything. That's been the biggest challenge for me, is finding something that I want to feed at the right price. Cause there's all kinds of crap out there and a lot of cheap crap. And you might not always want to feed that. And maybe I'm kind of fortunate here where I'm in this kind of not even going to say an island of grass, but there's a big area kind of around me that of this just grass because it's too steep and too rocky to farm. But just north of me, like less than an hour, there's plenty of irrigation and plenty of huge alfalfa farms. So alfalfa's been fairly inexpensive historically here. I mean, I don't even know. I didn't even get a price quote. I don't even have a current price quote for 5 months. Like 5 months ago, they were wanting $270 a ton delivered. Yeah, and that was out of my price range, so I just went and found something else. Something else you said that I think is kind of funny. So you said it was 2 hours to Walmart.
Yeah.
So we're 2 hours away is our shopping mall town. That's Wichita. 45 minutes is the Walmart town. Dollar General is 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of similar. We got a Dollar General, or I think it's a Dollar General, 40 minutes away.
Dollar General, Family Dollar. Yeah, they're all the same kind of carry and eater.
Yeah.
Can't even remember when the last.
I always tell people where we live, how can you live there? I always say, well, it's the last best.
How can you live there? Well, it's pretty easy. I just go home every day. I mean,
yeah, go home every day.
One just simply does not go to the 7-Eleven for a Coke and a candy bar when you feel like it, when you live that far from town. Like you plan that shit ahead. Like,
yeah, when we go to the Costco or go to do our, Costco's 4 hours away, but that's where we have family and stuff. So we, believe it or not, we do a lot of our grocery shopping 4 hours away from home. But yeah, we bring the pickup load home, stock up for the month.
When you don't have to bring home meat though and worry about it defrosting,
yeah,
you already have freezers full of that. It makes the grocery store trip a little bit simpler.
Yes. Yeah.
So you also mentioned you guys do some cover cropping. So tell me about that and how that works. So and maybe also give me an idea of how that land, you said 11,000 acres, of how the land base is split between like farmable land and just grazing land.
Well, there's about 4,500 acres of this is kind of rough. Yes, here. Not really that rough, but pretty close, of native pasture that's got draws and good winter protection and good native grasses, what's supposed to be here, right? And then the other half is old farm ground that was farmed out, that my great granddad's generation, they rolled in here in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, just broke it up, farmed it up, and I've heard somewhere before that there's the formula, the first 10 years they got the cream of the crop, and then the next 40 they farmed and it was profitable, and then after that you were working with depleted soils or something like that. I don't know if that was very standard for everywhere, but I can just think about all this. We're in sandy soil to begin with, and all these guys came out here and they broke it up, and then they farmed it, and then they farmed it, farmed it, and farmed it, and farmed it, and most time weed on weed on weed on weed on weed. I got a funny thing about wheat farmers. I always like to tell, and I tell my buddies that are wheat farmers this too, but there's this one wheat farmer that was going broke and went to the bank and said, well, sir, you're going to have to do something different. This wheat farming, you're going broke. We're not going to renew. So he goes home, he does a bunch of research. He figures out, hey, I'm going to plant some watermelon. So he plants some watermelons and bam, he's got a booming crop of watermelon. And he does this for 4 or 5 years and goes in and he pays the bank off. The bank says, well, now what are you going to do? He says, man, I'm going to go plant some wheat. But anyway, that's what happened on the Beaver Flat where the ranch is on the edge of what we call the Beaver Flat Divide. And all this stuff up on top is really productive, and alfalfa and grass really loves it, but it's really tough to get natives started on it because it's farmed out depleted for so long. And so, and then the CRP programs hit, and a lot of ranchers left and then just, CRP'd their land up and and got paid to be absentee, own their land. And then they all moved to California or wherever, a lot of them. And so you have all this, back then when it seemed like everybody that planted a CRP or, planted to get into the CRP planted alfalfa and crested wheatgrass.
Okay.
And we bought a bunch of that land. And then so a lot of it was spiked in and rough. Some of it was rough, so rough you hate to ride your saddle horse across it, And so I am all on board with the no-till, and I apologize to the no-till listeners for doing that, but it was so rough that we needed to fix it, and so we didn't, for one reason, we didn't have a no-till drill, and we didn't have the sprayer, but my dad knew that we could go in and disc it up, and get it smoothed up and plant it back to. It used to be back in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd just plant it like if it was on his own farm ground, it was an old burnt up hayfield, and you could plant that to wheat for a year or two, and then you could plant grass and alfalfa, and that always seemed to work. That was the old recipe. But when we got, cover cropping and everything got more interesting in the late 2000s, of us getting kind of more familiar with it, I guess, and we decided we'd break some of the CRP up and that we had just bought. It just came out of CRP. It was kind of all the timing issue and the way it worked. We broke it up, and then we planted a cover crop. And with some of that stuff, we planted a cover crop for 3 years, and then we planted back to. But there had to be some pubescent and some alfalfa and some green needle and some western, and we've there was kind of a 5 species mix we were using for quite a few years, because we knew it worked and we knew it would grow, right? And then the further we got down the trail of, we've kind of screwed up. We've got too many monocultures up here on this same pasture. We've got to try and increase the amount of species. And so our latest ones, how we've done it is we'll go in there and we broke up that CRP, and we planted it to a cover crop. And then we went back and planted it to a cover crop and native, and alfalfa, just a lot of stuff we like. And we use the cover crop as what they call a companion crop or whatever now, just really light dose. And then by doing that, we got a little use out of it in the fall in some winter grazing. It wasn't a lot of cover crop, but what did come, we could get a little fall winter grazing and not hurt the incoming native, I shouldn't say native, but our incoming new attribute.
So is that kind of the philosophy going forward with, that half of the ranch that's retired farm ground, old CRP, is to do cover crops and incorporate native seeds in the mix with the hope that the natives eventually get established and start taking over? Is that the hope?
Well, yeah. I got a kind of another story. My dad bought a hayfield or some of this ground we're talking about, this fighting cheatgrass on it and stuff. And so he planted it back to grass alfalfa, and the cheatgrass came. And so he Japanese grow, whatever, that's what we call cheatgrass here. I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
Just hate that stuff with passion. And so he went in there and we had a field cultivator at the time, and he went in there and field cultivated it and just scratched the top and killed all the cheatgrass, just tore all the cheatgrass out. And when you do that, it seems like all you do is piss the alfalfa off, so we didn't really kill any of that out. And then he planted a more extensive native grass mix, some big blue, some western, some green needle, a bunch of stuff. Well, then for the last 10 years, I've just been grazing it in my grazing system. Or maybe it's actually been longer than that now. It's been more like 15 years now. But in 2019, all of a sudden we saw a ton of big blue come up in that. And Dad couldn't remember planting any big blue in that night. And so we're thinking, man, we're really doing her, Harry. We got some big blue coming, there must be this in the seed bank here, Well, we got to looking back, and all Dad had, there was 2 bags of big blue that he had sitting around, and he said, yeah, I'll just throw these in. And Dad said, yeah, we'll throw them in the mix. That's fine. And it took 10 years for that to show up. I never saw it in that field before then. And so through grading practices and getting our soil health up, I guess what I'm trying to say is even though we planted it and it didn't come, it must have still been there. You know what I mean? Like a seed bank issue.
I have a theory.
Yeah.
I have a theory because, okay, so similar situation on this ranch. When Dad took it over in the late 80s, there was a couple hundred acres of farm ground. And the way he got control of the land and the way that great grandfather's estate was settled, he didn't have a tractor. Like he wasn't given, like he didn't get any of the tractors or any of the farm machinery. He just got the land. And, a lot of that other machinery was, it was already 20 or 25 years old at that point. So it was, it got sold off. So he gets a property with a couple hundred acres of farm ground. So he went to the NRCS office or soil conservation, whatever the hell it was then, and talked to them. And by the way he tells it is he got a couple bottles of tequila, an old 77 Chevy pickup with a 350 and a 4-speed. And he went to town and he got the no-till drill and he filled it full of grass seed. And he put that truck in 4-low in first gear and drank tequila and drove around the pasture.
I like it.
Now, I don't remember any of this because this is like 1985, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure all the rows were perfectly GPS straight and everything looked nice, right? So I didn't really pay attention to that part of the ranch. I mean, like I was a little kid growing up. I just wanted to go ride my 4-wheeler, right?
Yeah.
So it was when I came back from the Navy in 2006. That was one of the things that Dad and I went and looked at is, because there's a kind of one of our major access roads cutting right through there. We call it farm fields. We got a north farm field, south farm field. Then the next one over to the west, I call North Indian, South Indian. I mean, everything's got to have a name. I mean, nothing's racist. It's just, that's what the name was that came to me. So over the course, just say from 2007 to 2014, we're grazing down there. We're trying different grazing pressure, different move schemes. And the grass just really isn't spectacular. Well, then we had a wildfire in 2016 called Anderson Creek, burned about 340 odd thousand acres, including 100% of this ranch, like 95% of the wood that was on this ranch, like not just trees, but fence posts, 95% of the wood gone. Like, yeah, dude, I spent the whole summer of 2016 rebuilding fence, putting in corners and building gates. Like that was my life.
Yeah.
But then in the aftermath of all that, like it also gave me a great opportunity to like re-zero everything on the whole ranch and monitor grass growth. So I did an awful lot of that. And as I was touring through that south part of the ranch, I was starting to see grasses that weren't there a year ago or 2 years ago. Like, well, what is this? Well, that's big blue. Well, that's Indian grass. So your point of having that seed lay dormant in the seed bank for a long time hits home because I experienced the same thing. So part of my theory is, you described your soil as sandy. I would describe my soil as sandy loamy. So
probably sandy loamy.
Probably pretty similar. And my theory about what happened, so when Dad planted it back in the 80s, it was just grass seed. He came back in but 98, 99 or 2000 and put some Forbes seed back on there. My theory is it was never deep ribbed. So there was that plow pan that was 4 to 6 inches down. Yep. And it just took the plants almost 20 years for their roots to go down and penetrate that pan and start to break that pan, that the really tall, deep-rooted C4 grasses like big blue and Indian grass, it just took them so long to be able to get down and break that pan. And it had to have other plants help it break the pan. It just took so long for the soil conditions to get right for those plants. That's why we didn't see them. That's why it may take 10 years after you throw out some of those seeds before you see them express themselves, I think.
So kind of going back to your original question is what are we going to do now? Well, we sold the drill and we sold what we were using as a high-speed disc, a Joker, a Horst Anderson Joker for a lot of this stuff. We sold all that. And now I just plan on doing kind of some fun things like you're talking about, getting the tequila and getting in the tractor and just going out there and plant some stuff that I like and seeing what comes. You know what I mean? I know that's an expensive proposition, and I'm not gonna it's not like I'm gonna go do the whole ranch in 1 year. But I know that my end goal is to get a lot more species growing, and I've asked so many farmers, or what I like. I call them farmers, and some of them take offense, but I ask so many people that know more about farming than I do, because I do not claim to be a farmer or know a lot about it. But how do I? And everybody's response usually is, well, you got to spray it and then you got to replant it. Well, I don't want to spray it and replant it. I like a lot of what I got. I just want to add to. And I have not got any clear cut answers or recipes, and I'm sure there probably isn't one. That was an encouraging, like you're saying, that's encouraging to hear your story and to see the results on some of the stuff I've seen that, if I could just get it out there, maybe maybe in the future it'll be dividend.
Yeah. And people shouldn't get hung up on, well, I planted that. How come that didn't grow in 1 year? Okay. Yeah, you're right. It didn't grow. Go ahead, nuke it with chemical, plow it up and start over again next year. Like that's a worthwhile strategy. And we want to think that the natural world follows, is going to do what we want. And it really doesn't. Like, the more variables we leave in the system, the more natural we leave the system, the more unpredictable the result.
Yeah.
And just have to roll with that. Moving on. Tell me about land trust. How'd you get hooked up with land trust?
Oh man, my sister does some consulting work in the regenerative egg stuff and grazing and stuff like that. Called it Open Egg Consulting, and that's our brand. You can see on my hat.
Okay.
She's off the ranch and married to an engineer now, but that she obviously takes pride where she came from and used it in her name. But she and my dad were at a winter thaw, they call it, in Billing. And Colton had just kind of started this company and got it going. Not Colton, sorry, Nick. And I think Colton was there as well. But Nick had just gotten this started. And my sister knows one of Nick's friends that's Culture Degrees out of Billing, the Joliet area. And they all kind of got to talking. And Nick kind of got to talking with my dad. And Nick, it's pretty easy to talk to.
Yep.
And so he said, you guys should really look into this. And they brought it, the idea home to me. And I said, well, geez, I've always been, most everything's usually worth a phone call at least, and they said, well, we'll just come out and take pictures and look and look at your place and take pictures and kind of shoot you some options and what you can do. And ever since then, I've actually done ads for them and they came to my place and did a commercial, I guess you could call it. And we just had a real good relationship. So I wouldn't say I was one of the founding members, but I was close to the beginning of their journey. And I knew that it was going to go big because it's just a really good, I think it's just a really good thing they've got going on. It's no skin off anybody's back. And my area, and I'm sure you probably have the same deal in your country and maybe a different dynamic, but the Minnesotans during hunting season just flooded this country and they all want to come hunt, it became little Minnesota almost.
Louisiana and Florida. Louisiana and Florida, where all ours are from.
Yeah, so you can relate. Different dynamic, different people or area they pulled from, but the same situation. And my dad always said that there's nobody cheaper than a Minnesota hunter. And they used to come here and they would, hunt, and you wouldn't ever get anything out of them. And not that, we're not trying to be an outfitter or anything. But sometimes it's nice that they throw you a Coke or a bottle of whiskey or something. And a lot of times they wouldn't. And I'm not going to say that all of them were like that, because we do have a lot of friends from Minnesota that did start out. But that's kind of what left a sour taste in a lot of the people in our area's mouth is, hunting and hunters is that era of hunters. And so when Land Trust came along and, they're doing background checks and they're carrying the insurance and they're doing the advertising and I get to say yay or nay and still have complete control of my place. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer to me. And so I said yes. And I just saw Nick last week. I delivered some beef to him. He bought some beef for me. So
that's why he told me no. That's why he told me no when I offered to send him a box of cow.
Sorry about that.
No, that's hey, I'm all about it. Shake the hand that feeds you. I'm a little further away. You're close and can go meet him face to face. And I fully support that.
Yeah.
So what's been, I guess, deer hunting, bird hunting, coyote hunting, pretty much the usual stuff. What's the most unusual thing that you've done through Land Trust?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's unusual, but the one that surprised me the most is the turkey hunt.
Okay.
Where a turkey hunter will come from and what they'll do to come hunt a turkey. And I never saw the opportunity. That's what's cool about it too, though, is I never saw the opportunity to sell turkey hunts on my place. And it'd be so rewarding for the customer, I guess, or for the hunter to come do it. And so that I'm still getting into the agritourism, and maybe it's my area that's a little bit for the agritourism to kick in. But I do offer horseback riding and stuff like that. And then I've got camper hookups and stuff that work for campers, but I haven't really had anybody show up and want to do anything like that yet. But that is a little bit newer on the Land Trust thing. So I'm hoping to get a little bit more into that. People want to come ride on the ranch and, enjoy what God created, then that'd be great. Love for them to come see the place. And I think it's important for us as ranchers. That's also what I tell a lot of people that are interested in Land Trust. It's important for us ranchers to get the hunters from the city and the people from wherever. And then we could build this bridge between the rancher and the beef and the customer, a lot easier. And spread our message a lot more,
Yeah. Outreach, public outreach. And, if you have a little bit of beef to sell and somebody's coming out to
you get them in the yard, every hunter has a cooler too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. They probably did show up with a cooler because they expected to take an animal home and, hey, if you didn't get a deer this year, I'll tell you what, I'll make sure you go home with full coolers, no matter what you do. Yeah. Then think about that one. I have sold a little bit. I have sold some of my beef to some of my Land Trust guests. And that's definitely, an avenue.
Yes. Yep.
All about getting more. The more people, the more eyeballs, foot traffic, that all eventually translates to sales of some kind if you've got a product worth selling.
Yes.
All right. So tell me what's the best advice you'd have for somebody that's wanting to start out in farming or ranching or agriculture today?
Sorry to be chuckling, but the thing that popped in my head, there's an old football coach up here from Butte. His name's Bob Green. And one of his famous quotes is we're kind of like a woodpecker in a petrified forest. Just keep busy and look for opportunity. But look for opportunities in a lot of areas. Haven't been, I think we get stuck in a rut in agriculture. This is the way that our grandpa did it. This is the way that our dad did it. This is the way that I'm going to do it. And that just don't work anymore. And in a lot of cases, it hasn't been working. Right. So look for new things to try. Also look for some different marketing avenues. Try some different grazing practices. Maybe try different species. I guess in a nutshell, just try some new things. And usually the worst case scenario is it's a walk. in most cases, things like, you know what I mean? And you might have gave up a little bit of your time, but in my experience and a lot of the new things that we've tried, but that's why we are where we're at, why my dad did what he did. He's always been the neighborhood or the county black sheep, it seems like, of being, and they'll even say that. All of our friends around the county will even say that. Well, old Chester, he's never afraid to try something new. And we've had a lot of failures because of it too. But like you said, they don't really go down as failures, and they never really hurt it financially in the end. Um, Sometimes a tweak and they work. You know what I mean? So that's one thing I would say definitely is to try something new and get a good support system of people that are doing something new and not afraid to share their ideas with you. That has also been very helpful. Is, you know, in business or in ranching, you know, and stuff, a lot of people have a tendency to play things really close to them. And if they've got something good figured out, they don't almost want to share it. You know, a lot of, shouldn't say everybody, but there's a lot of, it seems to happen a lot in ranching. You know, all we want to go to town and talk about is the weather and what's going on and, you know, well, the small town talk. But when you can have a support system and some people, hey, what do you think about this? I've got this idea. What do you think is the downside to this? And you've got a support system of some people that are doing some new and different things. That is very valuable because they're not afraid. Usually those people aren't afraid to tell you what's worked and what hasn't worked on their plate, or
what they did that didn't work.
Yeah. Or what they did that didn't work, or be supportive of somebody else trying something new too that they haven't tried yet. You know what I mean? And we need that. Everybody needs that, I think. So that would be, and also one of my other famous quotes is from that Moneyball movie. Sometimes the first guy through the door, or most times the first guy through the door gets the bloodiest. You remember that quote? If you're familiar with the movie?
No, I've never actually seen that one, but something very similar comes to mind, that pioneers take all the arrows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And so know that it depends on where you are in your situation, that, you know, you might lose some friends, but you're going to gain a lot more, or you might be the brunt of some gossip, but you're in the end, it's been beneficial to us to be the brunt of gossip, I guess. And it's changed. The wheels are turning in this regenerative. You know, we've been through all the buzz terms. There was the, you know, the
sustainable
grazing, mob grazing, you know, grass, organic, grass fed, you know, all of this stuff. And now we're kind of on this regenerative grazing. And I'm not going to say I hated any of it before, but let's just call them what they are. And most of them are all buzz terms, but this wheel's been turning for so long. I don't think you can stop it now. So.
No, I think market adoption is, or, you know, adoption of regenerative practices by producers is well past the 3% mark, where it's got a foothold. It's got a foothold in the marketplace, and it's not going anywhere, and it's only going to grow from here.
Yeah.
No, I think we're in a great spot in agriculture. And, you know, guys like your dad, my dad, you and me, we've had to take arrows and we've had to take barbs from established industry. And
yeah,
I think, you know, as time keeps moving forward, we're going to be proving the ones that are right. We're going to be proving the ones that are going to be here for the long term. So I think that's a great place to end. You got anything else?
I think so too. No, I just thank you for having me. I hope your listeners enjoy it. I sure enjoyed talking to you.
I really enjoyed it too, Chess. And guys out there in podcast land, hope you enjoyed it. Have a great week. And don't forget, I was going to say this just a minute ago, 7 most dangerous words in agriculture. We have always done it this way.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Go have a great week. We'll see you.
See ya.